Radical transformations in coding culture. 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 Radical transformations in coding culture.
Nigel Baker writes, "What makes a piece of entertainment a classic, and, by extension, what makes that classic a conceptual breakthrough which changes the way we feel about our surroundings and the world?" The writer Adam Rostakov argues that 5 characteristics define a classic, obviously each to his own, but bear with me. First, a coded reference to something greater than the work itself. Secondly, the work is a radical departure from that considered contemporary or fashionable. Thirdly, there is a missing jigsaw piece, the unwritten something that leads the audience to the fourth, the realization that the greater something hinted at in the first characteristic is within their grasp, and thus a transformation begins in the wider society. The 5th characteristic is the way certain works take their cue from popular trends, thus feeding into the first. Rostakov was thinking of Robert Heinlein's SF novel Stranger in a Strange Land, but there are many other works it could apply to. Take the old German tale of Friar Johann, who tried to investigate the clouds, accidentally slipped and poked his head through the sky, seeing the cogs and wheels 14th century Germans believed controlled the universe. More contemporary are the films of Steven Spielberg, David Lynch and Nicholas Roeg, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Shostakovich symphonies, and much more. The most obvious and overlooked example, at least in its entirety, is the Christian Bible. Most Christians find themselves tied in all sorts of ideological knots and tests of faith because they try to take it literally, not realizing its complex allegories have hidden meanings, and fish, virgin births, crucifixions, and the 40 days and 40 nights represent coded messages. What do they represent? See characteristic 3. What we like and why we like it are sometimes unquantifiable, but once, perhaps twice a decade, something comes along that gives us that leap to reinterpret the world, when the universe, the information mirrors can mesh with the mainstream, which drags us forward. Now I've just had this really good idea. Tree for 3. While walking through Stanmer Great Wood on the outskirts of Brighton, I was immediately struck by the single gnarled projection on a battered old tree. From a short distance it resembled a rather gummy profile of Mr. Punch. Punch became less discernible as I approached, and a longer look revealed a second image, that of a grinning pumpkin or moon-like face, half buried in the bark. This image was more effective at closer range due to the softening of shadow areas. These now modelled the chubby cheeks and nose rather than forming a bold outline. The third image was pointed out to me as I did not see it at first. It seems a little more fanciful, a small mammal, such as a weasel, clinging onto the tree. As with the second, I find this image clearest seen from relatively near, when a small knot in the wood's texture becomes the animal's eye. For me, Punch is still the strongest of the three, particularly at long distance when his features smile stark and isolated against the smoother background of the bark. The exercise of drawing the shapes was a fascinating one, for in deliberately misinterpreting the evidence, just a knobbly lump, I've come up with three very different concepts of characters concealed. They make useful illustrations of how any object or phenomenon is seen subjectively, perhaps with different stories from every witness. The tree's knobble acted as a control subject in the experiment, allowing variations on its appearance within the viewer's mind. With all three sketches, the basic shapes are the same.